Our Life of a Wildcat initiative began in 2015 when 40 juniors and seniors spent a half day hearing from you, John, and unanimously voted that your human performance project would be both of interest and value at our school.
That summer, 20 seniors met up with Grayslake North and Central and Barrington and spent 2 full days with John on a retreat. For us, that was where Life of a Wildcat was named, a torch was deemed our core symbol, and the tagline, happier, healthier, and higher performing was authored.
Since then, a lot has happened with our culture of well-being. We aim to bring awareness on sleep, nutrition, mental health, and substance use into as many areas of our school as possible. During the pandemic, about 12 students attended the ILHPP Leadership Conference last November. From that, we planned and executed our first time event called Wildcat Summit with 177 students and focused our student-led conversations on healthy minds, healthy bodies, healthy relationships, and healthy discourses.
Our senior class now has 99 senior wellness leaders who now have the torch and plan to lead efforts to inspire our school to be as healthy and supportive of each other as possible. We are excited to be a co-host for this year's Performance Academy.
All right, so there you go. Right, I just want to see by show of hands, how many of you guys in this room just learned something you didn't already know? Okay, that's awesome. So that's like kind of coming out of a pandemic. We sometimes lose a little bit of history. So just really happy to have this chance for everybody to come together and learn some stuff. So yeah, John, welcome.
Thank you, Brenda, and for everybody that's there. You know, I said before you guys got online today, I said to Kara, I said, you know, with a pandemic, you know, now it's heading into another year, and it sort of slows down the progress of programming. And you know, I used to say that when you start a program like this in your schools, you got to think that, you know, mostly it was high schoolers, and you know, every year freshmen come in that have never heard the message, and seniors leave. So you're losing a group and getting a group that comes in and really needs the information. And you know, so you have to keep, you know, redoing the modules, and you have to keep it alive. And it's been even worse with the pandemic. I had, you know, it's 2 years ago in March was my last program where I actually went to a school to do a program. And, you know, a lot of schools stopped doing special events and special programming. You know, it was enough during the pandemic just to either have kids in school or have them online doing at home learning. So it's definitely hurt our program as far as keeping it high profile. And, you know, I think you're lucky at Buffalo Grove and at Libertyville, because, you know, Mr. North and Dr. Nelson, they have, you know, been, you know, totally trained to the max in everything we do. And, you know, they wanted you to have this information. I mean, that's really the biggest reason it's got a high profile in your schools, not just with athletes, but in all circles, is that they took an interest in it very early on. And, you know, as far as around the metro and in Chicago area or in Illinois, you know, they're two of the people who have made this thing go forward and been an example to other schools to try to replicate it and, you know, make the information available to kids. So.
All right. So since our, I know we only have now 52 minutes. So let's like brag on John a little bit here. So like he's kind of a big deal. So he's created this Life of an Athlete Human Performance Project. I feel like these bullet points don't really do him justice, but he was a professional runner. He ran for Oregon Track Club and was an NCAA All-American. Has a nice base of performance himself under his belt. He's coached a lot of Olympians, both at the we can't see all the text here because of the faces, but I think that a really cool thing that we've had Navy SEALs, actually we've heard from them saying it was because of John's work and coming in with the Navy SEALs, that he totally overhauled how they train. That it used to be like this old school, rusted out little shed of a weight room, and really came in and like taught them about not only just how to train, but what are the factors that make somebody better. And really extending that it's not just a physical thing, but however you were performing. So like a sharpshooter needs a physical part, but we all sharpshoot in areas of our life, right? We need that mental acuity, and that our lifestyle really matters in those areas. So John has spoke to Olympic committees. He just has spoken like everything from Alabama football to the International Olympic Committee. And just, I feel like your real gift, John, is to be able to take performance science that can be super like technical and translate it into, just language that makes it more understandable for those of us who are common people. So thank you for your work, and let's kind of dive in. Today, we're going to be talking about central nervous system and just like its impact on mood and mindset. So if you could just start off and tell us, what is the most significant factor in human performance? There's thousands of them, right? So why don't you dive in?
Yeah, it's like I said, even in the early years, and a good analogy is, and it wouldn't matter if we were talking about dance, music, art, academics, you name it. A Navy SEAL, operator, any walk of life or any work or any project you're working on, if you want to have good possibilities to perform, like I said, it's a 1,000-piece puzzle. There's so many things that come into play, and during the 7 podcasts, we'll talk about those. But the number one factor is central nervous system readiness, and that's our topic for today. And the interesting part is that when you've got a brain that's, the average person has, they say, 87 billion, neurons, brain cells, and you have about 100 different kinds of neurotransmitters, or neurotransmitter types. And then to top it off, you have, about 1 trillion connections between those brain cells. You start to think, okay, how does this thing get controlled? How does it function? What would lead it to be at its best or not? And, we've looked into those things. You always say, okay, what's the causative factors that make me have a fantastic performance or a so-so performance or a really bad performance? And we've all experienced that in the things that we do, even at the age of a high school, student or athlete or anything. So we started to look at those things, and we realized that, in the old days, we used to break it down to the point where, like, if we're talking about sports, we train our muscles and we train our heart and lungs. That's pretty much what physical training is. But there's something even more important, which is the connection between the brain and the body. And so we started looking at, if there's going to be one factor that has to be checked off in the box that it's ready to go, it's central nervous system readiness. And that means that realistically, the simplest explanation in the terminology is that your brain has energy reserves rather than energy deficits. And that by itself is a challenge nowadays for all of us, young and old, no matter what you're involved in. It's a challenge because that necessitates that we really take care of ourselves. And I'm not going to say that we're all unhealthy, but we're living in a day and age where I think that a lot of those areas are compromised. So we started looking at sleep and nutrition and stress and all these factors that sort of take the edge off mental capacities that we need to run our bodies. And so that was the beginning of it. But we also looked into the research. Interestingly, when this project started, they had just started the Human Connectome project, which was to map the brain. It was a multinational project from brain scientists in many places in the world. the biggest and best brain science centers. UCLA Brain Science Center played a big role in it. But anyway, they were mapping the brain, and at the same time, we started to realize that, my God, if you don't have that box checked off, it almost puts you at a point where there's no way optimal performance can happen. And so that was the start. And we started looking at the Human Connectome Project and how critical it is that the brain is what controls the body, and that if you have these energy reserves, that your body will perform. And if we're going to have a race or a game or a performance, that has to be the most important factor.
So how would a performer in any of these areas, arts, academics, athletics, go about gathering energy reserves so they can go out and do really well? And Kara, do we have slides?
What's that?
I'm just asking Kara if we have slides.
There are,
Yeah.
so when John was gonna
Yeah.
refer, so I figured I'd make him center, and so he asked me to show them.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I can actually, we can pop up a couple of those slides just so you guys can get a taste for this. And I have them numbered here. So put up slide number 11, Kara, if you could. And these, I just popped these up. It's not really any sequential PowerPoint, but I mean, I had to number them so that I could ask for specific slides because I have tens of thousands of them. Even if you think about days, say there's a day that you have to perform, and it was either you were taking a test, or you were doing a performance on stage, or music or art or dance or sports or a job interview or anything you cared about. And if you look at this slide, you can see at the bottom there's a little brain energy, and the slide says ramp it up, but I mean, we try to take brain scans, for instance, and say, okay, look, there's not much brain energy, and there's a little more brain energy in the top one. The brain's all lit up. It's like it's good to go. And those are like just an example, visual example, because you guys most of all now are visual learners, where you could say, okay, what if you had to play a game and your brain was like the bottom level of brain activity, and you go out there and you play terrible, and you normally are scoring 12 points a game, and you miss every shot, and you make a bunch of turnovers and mistakes, and you just have a bad game. Well, then you have to start to analyze it and figure out, okay, well, why did that happen? And the biggest thing is that the brain builds up energy reserves or deficits over 2 to 3 days. One day is not enough really to build up the energy reserves so that your brain can function at an optimum level. It's rare that that happens. And so when the sleep studies started, and sleep became the biggest factor in gaining or building up reserves of brain energy, they started at Stanford University with Sherry Ma, a great researcher. And what she did is she looked at actual teams during competitive seasons, and they measured their sleep, and they measured performance. And what they found is that the brain builds up energy reserves over 1 to 3 days, but especially 2 to 3 days. So if you had an important thing happening on a Saturday, that means that you'd have to start really having a concern for building up energy reserves on a Wednesday night. So really good sleep Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then maybe on Saturday you go out and play an amazing game, and you don't make mistakes, and you score the normal amount of points, or maybe the most points you've ever scored, or you run your fastest time, or you just have a quantum leap in performance, because what's driving the performance is CNS readiness. And the second biggest factor, and Brenda and I talked about trying to get some of these points across to you guys, is your blood glucose levels, like your blood sugar levels. And if you had low blood sugar, maybe your brain would look like the bottom slide scan, and maybe if you had sufficient blood glucose levels, your brain would look like the top slide. You guys go to practice, a lot of you, at 3 o'clock every day, and you ate lunch at 11:30 in the morning, and you can have low blood sugar borderline by the time you go to practice. And, because of that, your brain energy levels are limited or compromised. And everyone, I think, probably knows what it feels like to have low blood sugar, and you feel weak and tired and confused, and you have trouble concentrating and focusing. And so, you really have to, say, okay, if I want to have my brain operate at a very high level, I've got to have energy reserves. That's going to necessitate the sleep 2 to 3 days out. And if I want to have, my brain running at an optimal level, and even throughout the game or the workout, morning or, earlier or mid workout or at the end of a game, for instance, you've got to have sufficient blood glucose levels, because they only drop once you start to do physical work. They even drop during the day if you're not doing physical work. They drop it during the day if you guys come to school and you haven't eaten breakfast. They're already bottomed out. And it affects mental performance just as much as it affects physical performance. So, we even started pushing this towards, really good considerations for learning and attention span and focus in the classroom, or taking a test. If you don't get your blood glucose levels up before you go into a high cognitive functioning, performance, you can have all kinds of glitches just from that. So those were the two biggest things, sleep and blood glucose levels. We know the same thing if athletes don't feed during long events. Like you watch, I'm sure you watch sports and Olympics and stuff, and you see the people grabbing water bottles. Well, they're not just drinking water. A lot of those athletes are drinking glucose, so that goes right in your bloodstream and right to your brain, so that your brain can continue to function at a high level and your performance outputs can stay at those levels. So.
Okay, so if you were to scale this, so I know that this is not the nutrition module here, but can you get more specific about what do those glucose reserves look like? What impacts them for the better or worse? Yeah, just get more.
Yeah. And these are things like we're going to have a whole module during these podcasts on sleep. And then we're going to have one on nutrition also. And nutrition it'll be nutrition, hydration, macronutrients, micronutrients, all the things that you really need. So your body functions at a high level for mental and physical performance. And we did studies. We started with college athletes. We found the average NCAA athlete sleeping about 6 hours and 14 minutes a night. I mean, you guys are going to be on to college, some of you next year and in the next couple of years. You probably already are. We after the college data we gathered from NCAA teams at 6 hours and 14 minutes of sleep a night, which is definitely not enough. We did the same studies on high schoolers because we had access in some states to all high school athletes in the state. I was working with New York State. We had 585,000 high school athletes in our state, and the program was mandated for 5 years by our state athletic association. So we started gathering info just in, surveys. We found high school athletes were sleeping 6 hours and 46 minutes a night. It's not enough. And, you could have lots of rationalization. You could say, well, I want to get in a good school. I study. I have to stay up and study late, and I have all these other things that I do besides just playing my sport or being a student. And when you combine them all together, it cuts into the time that you need to take care of yourself. And if you want to shortchange the sleep, you could be a top athlete. I'm not going to say you're going to be some terrible athlete, but I could say this: you would probably shock yourself at the performance levels you would hit and how good you would feel in training and in performing if you would start to sleep, a required amount that would give you the reserves that you need to perform. And like I said, for a long time, if you asked going back, 100 years, how much sleep does a human being need? Most people would say 8 hours. I mean, that's just the way it is. And the difference between 6 and 8 is like night and day as far as performance. So Sherry Ma started those sleep studies at Stanford, and here's the ironic part that came out of those studies. And it was interesting because their women's basketball team that year played for the national championship game. They lost in the finals. So, you weren't looking at a team that was, not really competitive, but they did it with their swim team. They always have one of the best swim teams in the country. And here's the interesting thing that came out of her studies. Not some of the people who slept more had better performance, not half the people, third. It was every single person. When they slept 2 weeks with extended sleep, their performance went up. Every single person on every single team, when they slept reduced sleep or less sleep, their performance levels went down. So it just was a clear indicator that, if we're going to look at one thing for you to have your brain be absolutely top-notch functional when you go to do your thing, it's sleep, building up central nervous system reserves. And you can't accumulate it really in a day. If you heard everybody say, well, hey, it's Friday night, we got a game tomorrow, you got to get a good night's sleep. Well, that's a wise decision, but it's not enough. It just made me start to realize after coaching athletes that it comes down to priorities. And this is the hard part when you have people drawn in so many directions nowadays, especially our young people, academics, and maybe you have music and art and your own personal life and your own social life, and then you're an athlete and you're playing 2 or 3 sports like most kids do. You start to realize that, I'm juggling all these balls, and once in a while some are going to drop. And I think if you ask most people who put in the time, effort, and energy into a project, whether it's music, art, dance, sports, anything, the ones you care the most about, those aren't the ones where you want the balls to be on the ground dropped, because you put in so much to what you're doing that it just doesn't pay out. So anyway, those are, I think, 2 statements. I wanted to read you guys something. I actually have to read it because it's sort of long, but I think you'll get the gist of it. The guy that figured out this whole thing about the brain and the body, one of the most interesting factors is a guy named Tim Noakes from South Africa. He was a scientist, and he had a lot of theories that were spot on and ended up being a whole new level of sports science. And this was it. He says, think about this when you guys are doing practice or a game or a competition. Research shows motor recruitment and fatigue during exercise will be affected by a huge variety of factors, including your emotional state. Now there's your mood and being positive and going into it thinking, hey, I got this, I can do this. Mental fatigue. So mental fatigue's rough. You're going in and you're dragging. Your brain scan looks like the one on the bottom of this page of the image. Recovery from previous exercise. Okay, you didn't have enough rest since the last time you were exhausted. Sleep, blood glucose levels, motivation, self-belief, prior knowledge of the duration of the exercise, cerebral and arterial oxygenation to the muscles. Right, getting oxygen to your working muscles. So listen to this one. Fluid loss, you're dehydrated, thirst, heat, and more. In fact, the prediction of this model is potentially everything can potentially affect athletic performance, but the most important of these effects begins and ends in the brain. So, you want to have the most important thing you can do is to know that your brain can function at a high level, because that's what's driving the whole thing. So.
Show us some, you have some really cool slides.
Yeah.
Let
me give some numbers to Kara so she can pop these up. I have them here on my other phone. So hang on for a second. Kara, if you could put up number 10. This is from the Human Connectome project, where they started mapping the brain's all the brain's functions for cognitive function, for thinking and classroom and tests and like focus and all those things. But then they start to realize, okay, here's all these different sectors for physical movement and movement memory. And, you practice a skill, whether it's learning to play a guitar or a musical instrument or fine motor skills in sport, or you know, the connection for the brain and body. Another one, Kara, if you could pop up is number 5, neural drive. Okay, so neural drive is the signal from your brain to your muscles. All right, and I mean, you're thinking your brain's up here, it's a control center. It's those signals have to go down your body, not just to make you move. All right, I mean that's all of these skills that we have that we take for granted. I mean, like once you become a good basketball player, I mean, it's easy to dribble. You know, I mean, it's not like it's something you can almost do without thinking about it. But like, how strong is the signal and how long does it last? And you know, can you maintain the signal during an entire performance? And you know, if you look at like fatigue, under the highest levels of fatigue, that's when all the mistakes happen. I mean, you guys, I'm sure have been, you know, in a competitive situation where you're having a great one, and all of a sudden at the end it comes unglued. Everyone's experienced it. You know, I think that's a big thing with athletes is like, you know, you start out and you're playing great, and you know, you're giving somebody a real good game. You're having you're winning the game, and all of a sudden the last quarter, the mistakes set in, and it all ends up going down the tubes. That's because you probably had glitches with the neural connection or this neural drive that has to be maintained. I was working with skiing, and I was talking. I remember the first time I did it, I was at Dartmouth, and they won the NCAAs in skiing that year, and they had a fantastic cross country ski team, and they had a great alpine ski team, and they had a couple top alpine skiers in that group. And I was saying, you know, like, you know, sometimes you see these people and they got a great run going, and they're ahead, they're leading at all the checkpoints, and then you miss a gate right at the end, and you ski out, and it's over. That's what happens. The signal reached the level of fatigue, the brain shut it down, the muscles can't do the work, and it goes down. Pop up slide number 12, if you could. We've put out a ton of just simple statements. You know, it is all about sleep. You know, I mean, you guys are, you know, if I polled every, you know, young person watching this right now and said, you know, how much sleep you're getting, most people would probably say, well, I shortchange it because I have to. I have all these things I have to do. And like I said, if I was your coach, God forbid for you, I would just say, look, you know, this is the one we can't shortchange. You know, you've got to adjust your schedule to fit this in, because this is the most important brick in the wall. And if you don't have this taken care of, we're probably nowhere near where we could be. And that's also important. And when we would do the sleep podcast, this is when all the restorative, regenerative, restorative factors kick in at night. But it's also when all your gains happen. You know, at night is when, you know, training effect really takes place away from the workouts. The workout's the stimulus. Once you recover, most of those things transfer and happen when you're in sleep. So, you know, not just growth is going on with your young bodies right now, and you're all still growing. It's also all those repair jobs that have to happen. And it's not just repairing the body. A huge amount of studies have been done now. It started at University of Rochester, that just like by the end of the day, we have a whole bunch of residue and waste in the body that's got to be flushed out of the body. The same exact thing is going on in the brain. At night, your brain washes out the brain with cerebrospinal fluid and gets all these, the guy actually that did the study calls them candy wrappers, washes out all the residue from your brain, from all the neural functions that are happening that leave residue in your brain. So it's really a complex and important piece, but it has to happen. If it doesn't happen, you really, you know, you're not at your best. You may think you are, but you're not. And I think that's a message for all of you.
John, what are the specific functions of sleep that sort of wash the residue?
It's really interesting, because if you think, we only found this out like in the last 5 or 6 years, And then they really honed in on it because they're I don't know if you guys have ever had a lot of like, all right, final exam week comes up and, you're burning it and your brain feels like just exhausted, and you cram all that information in and you're trying to recall it. But you also have these during the daytime, you have these periods where you feel like brain fog. You feel like your brain is just exhausted because it is. And you're doing so much more cognitive function that your brain is just has accelerated. You have all the residue left in the brain at night. So they actually started to look at people who sleep more have higher GPAs than people who cram and stay up late. We did that study with our New Hampshire Life of an Athlete project. The GPA was, I think it was maybe like 2.49 for people who, who stay up and sleep, minimize sleep and cram and study late, and people who got the required amount of sleep, their GPA was 2.95. So that was just an average of all the GPAs and surveys that we took with people who, really conscientiously study and have to get it done. And I think that's something that we're not going to, if I told you how to prepare for your life, very few of us are going to sign a contract and make millions of dollars being an athlete. But I can tell you this, there's still a whole bunch of people who feel that that's really important, as there are who are in music or dance or art or just are totally consumed by their academic schedules and plans. So that's a big part of it. Any go on, because we're going to run out of time here, Brenda. But go ahead and head into some other sectors. About 10-minute warning. We got about a 10-minute warning, Brenda.
Oh, we're done at 9:20. I thought we were done at 9:30.
There's
No, I know
a 9:15 to 9:30 is a Q&A section.
Oh,
So
gotcha.
students can come up and ask.
Yeah. Well, you've covered Tim Noakes. You've covered sleep and blood glucose. What else about CNS just do you feel is critical that we haven't talked about?
Well, we also talked about neural drive, which is the signal, maintaining the signal between your brain and your muscles, really. Because once it's compromised, you can't make them, either you can't make the movements, or your biomechanics change, or you make mistakes. There's miscues, mistakes. If you could go back a couple slides just slowly, and I'll tell you where to stop, if you could, Kira. Right there. Here's an interesting one. If you guys do max stuff, like if you have a really hard game or really hard workout, and I'm talking like 90% effort to 100% effort, where you really stress yourself physically. So let's say we go over 90% of our full speed, or 90% of something we can lift, or play a really hard competition game. Yeah, your muscles the next day are going to be sore and fatigued and tired and damaged. Yes, your heart and lungs are going to be fatigued. There's no doubt about that. But the biggest level of fatigue is actually in the central nervous system. And so we started to push an agenda that when you do really high-end stuff, you need to take at least 24 hours, but probably even closer to 36 to 48 hours for your central nervous system to come back. You could be ready to go back physically. We call the heart and lungs your central system. It can be ready to go the next day. You can recover that in 24 hours. There's no doubt about it. We know that the muscles, if you do all the muscle restorative, options that we have nowadays for athletes. I mean, I was working with the Miami Heat a few years ago. They had during the playoffs 5 games in 7 days. Think about that. And you're out there playing hard as you can every minute of those games. So in between the games, as soon as the game's over, you're starting all these recovery protocols and, icings and all these restorative muscle functions, massage and pressure and all, pressure garments and things. And you got to be ready to go tomorrow, same time. Here we go again. And And those guys actually pull it off to a great extent. But the biggest concern we found when we started doing those projects was, again, what's going to bring the brain back? And a lot of it has to do with sleep. You guys tire yourselves out also with neural fatigue just from your technology, playing with your phones. And, I guess the study was done a few years ago that was the average teenager checks their phone 150 times a day. So, I mean, you got classes and stuff, and hopefully you're not messing with your phones during this, during class, but like in between classes, you're checking messages. As soon as you get out of school, the frequency goes up. At night, the frequency goes up. You're multitasking with technology. You're listening to tunes, you're doing your homework, and you're on a computer chatting. And, you start thinking about all that brain function intensifies because there's so many different channels playing. And you're just using up neural energy that is already fatigued by the end of the day. So like at nighttime, it's not time to ramp up the technological use of gadgets. It's actually to tune it down. And we started promoting, at nighttime, really trying to limit your neural fatigue, and starting recovery processes by not using a lot of technology in the evening. And you know how that one plays with people who want to, at the end of the day, socialize and catch up, on the net. So it's not easy, and so that's a problem too. Your circuitry eventually gets frazzled. We even got into doing some studies with the military and with firefighters, actually, out west. NorCal firefighters, the guys in California that have had to fight for the last 5 years, these horrible forest fires. After 14 hours, you're pretty much done. And, neural fatigue sets in and you just make mistakes. I mean, that's how people not only make mistakes, that's how people end up compromised and dead in a lot of situations. And we brought a lot of that research into our programs for naval special warfare, which is the SEALs and the Air Force and some of the other projects we are working on. Roll a couple slides up. Maybe I can show you some other ones on this. Here's a good. I was with a D1 baseball team, and I said, okay, who's the pitchers in here? And like four or five guys raised their hands in the classroom. We're doing an educational piece. And I said, how many pitches are you good for? And they all look, they told me to a number. Guys are going, I'm good for 59 pitches, or 65 pitches, or 43 pitches. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's not a full game if we're pitching to multiple batters over 9 innings. And like these guys actually knew how long they could throw, how many, so that limits even like how many warm-up pitches you take, right? I mean, if you're throwing warm-ups, those are pitches you could be throwing in the game. There's a limit to it. And eventually you start throwing balls and you get, you can't throw accurately, or guys start hitting you and it's over. So again, that's CNS readiness. How'd you like to throw 10 more pitches? Just depends if you've got it or if you don't. So that's go up another slide and let me see. Yeah, there's another one. Fatigue is fatigue, but there's fatigue over time, right? I mean, the later the game, the further you go into the game, the higher levels of fatigue, different things start showing up. Power, endurance, right? We have power, we're strong, but are we strong at the beginning of the game, the first quarter, the second quarter? Do we reboot any of it at halftime? Do we come out in the third quarter and fourth quarter and we're getting knocked off the field? I mean, there you go, guys. Same thing with skills. Your skills get sloppy when you get tired. You can't pull it off. You get to the end and you make a bunch of mistakes and the game's over. So that's important too. Here's another one that we didn't even start to talk about, but we will when we're talking about some of these other functions. What if we have stress and we don't know how to handle it? And I know at least for you kids at Libertyville, you've got somebody who understands with Dr. Nelson and mindfulness and all those things. All right, how do we handle stress? I mean, stress robs your energy, and it certainly robs your energy in central nervous system readiness. I mean, you have a stressful event the morning of a big, a big plan that you had to perform on the day, and it's the state championships, and something really rattles you from a stress standpoint. You wake up in the morning and you find out something real bad or whatever. Your chances of having that not affect you are slim and none. And probably it will affect you, because your energy reserves, when you drop those stress hormones, one of the first places it hits is the brain and central nervous system. And it frazzles a lot of those functions that you're going to try to tune in later to those channels that will perform optimal performance, and it's just not there. It's not happening. And so what we have to do is try to minimize stress when we're looking at something big happening. You can't have constant trauma and stress and drama. We look at relationship drama, how it can just wreak havoc on mental and physical performance. So that's important consideration also, is how do you deal with stress? And if you don't deal with stress, we'll talk about this when we do the mental wellness podcast, that you really need to find a way to to deal with it so that you can not have it just totally trash your plans to perform. Go ahead, another couple of those slides if you could, and I can we already had that. Oh, there's the one, the 4 levels of fatigue. I mean, this is a good way to end it, as far as we're getting to the end of our time. Structural fatigue, stand all day on your feet. Some of you probably had a summer job and you're standing all day, and by the end of the day, your legs are so structurally exhausted just from gravity and from standing and shifting your weight back and forth that your feet are sore, your knees are sore, your hips are sore. Even young people, wait till you get to be our age, gets a lot worse. Muscular fatigue, muscles run out of fuels, muscles become dehydrated, and muscles become fatigued all at the same time. And those 3 factors together end up, and you run out of fuels, end up leaving you with muscles that just don't function. Also, at the same time, the signal from the brain to the muscles is failing. So that's another level of fatigue. Hormonal, your hormones that's really actually maximize physical outputs actually diminish at some point in time, and once they go down, you feel weak and tired, and you can't make it happen. Metabolic, your metabolism eventually you can't support function. And at the bottom, the most important one at the bottom, where it should be up at the top, neural. You didn't start out with central nervous system readiness. Don't kid yourself. I mean, you can try and talk yourself into it, but don't kid yourself to think that you're going to have your best performance. I would be willing to say this to a lot of you. If you had central nervous system readiness every time you went to perform and do the thing that you care the most about and have put the most time, effort, and energy into, you would probably really surprise yourself how awesome it would go if you would just invest in CNS readiness versus, have energy reserves in your brain and CNS when you start to do your thing instead of deficits, because most people are going in with deficits. It's a long day to be at a wrestling tournament and wrestle 3 or 4 matches and make the finals, and then go out there and have your hand raised, or, go out and punch a hard race at a speed you've never run before and say, today I'm going to run my fastest time. And you end up going out really hard and you didn't have the CNS readiness, and halfway through the race, you're fading back through the pack. Or like I said, you're playing an important game and you got all these great thoughts that it's going to go awesome and you're going to win, and you go out there and it's a dud. And a lot of it begins and ends in the brain, just like Tim Noakes said. So take it into consideration. I always say that the checklist: blood glucose levels up, CNS readiness is up. You're rested, your muscles are rested, your central nervous system is rested and ready, and you have positive outlook, mood and mindsets is there. You say, hey man, I really in my heart believe I'm going to go out and do this, and all those things are there. and your functions are optimal and you go out and do it. And that's how top performance happens. Where you're saying to yourself, how did I do this? I can't believe I just did this. You know, I'll tell one last story just to make this thing end. I had a kid from a really small school, and he was like a 9:52 miler, and he was good. He was good for where he competed, but he didn't. You know, 9:50, you're not going to get to states in our state. Anyway, he started working with him as a junior. He's a senior, and he goes down and runs a real competitive race, and he runs like a 9:22 mile, and he from 9:50 something to 9:20. He would have ended his season that day, and he was so happy. He called me, he goes, John, I just ran a 9:22 mile. I go, well, it ain't over yet. I said, you can run even faster. He goes, really? You think so? And I said, yeah, I think so. So a week later, he goes to States, and he ran a 4:10 mile and a 9:0 something 2 mile. And he got second in both in the States. And to go that far in a year from 9:50 to 9:10 or under 9:10 and run a 4:10 mile, you know, all those things had to be there, or it wouldn't have happened. There's no way it would have happened. So it's not just one of these things. The more pieces of the puzzle you have, the more you put in place, the more things start to go in the direction that you all want it to go in. So these are some of the things, and I hope you got something out of this. Any other wrap up last minute questions, Bren?
Did get a question in the chat, John. If you
Okay.
wanted to kick it off with that, let me pull it back up here. The question I received was, what does an appropriate sleep routine look like?
Yeah, it's a great question. And when we have a sleep manual, guys, and I mean, I would encourage you to get it. You know, you can get it through Mr. North or Dr. Nelson. You can find it. You can find it lots of places online. Or you can contact you guys or us, and we can make it available and put it up. Let's do that, Kara. Here you got to have almost like a countdown. You know, we call it digital sunset. Like, you start winding down the use of technology. You know, a reasonable time before you sleep, you have to calm yourself down. You can't. You know, there's a list of like things in the schedule. Like, you know, it's like a sleep preparation list, and what it would mean is that you go through like a calming down, you know, segment. You limit technology in the last 45 minutes before you sleep. There are certain foods that actually are you know, sleep onset positives. One of my favorites is black cherry juice. But anyway, there's foods that are sleep inducing. They actually make you release tryptophan, and go to bed at the same time. I mean, like, you know, people who have good sleep hygiene, they call it, they go to sleep at the same time, they get up at the same time. I mean, that's, you know, I'll say this to you: if you want to be a great performer, creature of habit. You know, you don't throw yourself curves all the time by doing stuff, you know, all random stuff gives you random results. Once in a while, you'll have a good performance, and you'll go, wow, I wonder how that happened. So start thinking about that, and also dinner time, like how late at night you eat solid foods. You know, you don't want to be eating a lot of solid foods after 8 o'clock at night. You release hormones that actually disturb sleep. Same thing, you know, watching a bunch of technology stuff with the blue light just before you go to sleep is going to create sleep disturbances. You're not going to be able to transition from wake state to sleep. We'll talk about that when we go into the sleep discussion. But people have good sleep habits. It's something that you stick with. It's no different than sticking with your pre-race meal, sticking with your magic warm-up that you always do before you perform. Rituals, you know, get into like doing it the same way. Hey, it must have worked because I just ran my fastest time. I'm going to do the same thing next week. You know, that's a smart approach. Any other questions?
Yeah, let's open it up here. Does anybody have any questions? Andrew, yeah.
So let's say like you do have a good sleep schedule and you're normally getting to bed early and getting 8 hours. What would happen if you like take one night and that's sacrificed and you don't get a lot of sleep for?
you know, I don't think necessarily one night hurts you if you have this, like, good sleep habits. You know what happens is if you're going to go in with the 6 hours and 40 minutes a night of sleep, or the 6:14 by the time you guys are in college, I'll guarantee you when you go to college, you're going to sleep less than you sleep now. It's just the way it is. It'd be rare if that didn't happen. But here's the problem. Just like you build up energy reserves over 2 to 3 days, I had athletes I coached in big races I ran and stuff where the night before the race, I was looking forward to the race so much that I wasn't nervous, but or these athletes will tell you, I wasn't nervous, but I just wanted it to be over. Right. So they have all this nervous energy about, tomorrow it's 5 hours. I'm going to be up on a starting line, and you're losing sleep the night before the big event. It could freak you out. But if you've gotten sleep 2 days out, 3 days out, you don't get a lot of sleep the night before a big competition, you can still go out and perform because you have reserves, because you had, like I said, if you have a game on, Friday night and you start 3 days out getting good sleep, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, even Thursday night, you're nervous and you don't sleep that much, or you have some sleep disturbances. Maybe you can't fall asleep. The next day you can go still play a good game, as far as what we know, because you have energy reserves. So that's important. It's a good question too to ask. It's like one night's not gonna wipe out your possibilities. And I think that's something we also, I used to tell athletes, if they'd come and say, I didn't sleep at all last night. I said, don't worry, it's no problem. You got sleep 2 days before and 3 days before, you're fine. We use these educational pieces like Dr. Nelson told you. I mean, when I went to Alabama, they had won the national championship that year, and then they were ranked number 1. The rankings came out when I was down there. It was preseason. It was in August, or maybe in July. Anyway, I'm down there, and when I left, I came home and I got a nice letter from the coach, and he said to me, Coach Saban, thanks so much. Our guys are all talking. This is what we wanted. We've instituted now a sleep study to assess each player's sleep, dynamics. And, if you find out somebody's not getting enough sleep, put a Band-Aid on that one first, because that's the biggest problem that exists, I see, with athletes. And we'll also talk about the second biggest problem with athletes after that, which is your social life's more important than your athlete life, which is something to talk about. And I'm not just talking about partying. I mean, it's like social aspects sometimes are a giant cause of concern for you guys as far as your sleep hygiene. Staying up late, there's usually a reason you're staying up late. Sooner or later, you got to turn it all off. And if you turn it off, you go into all those money in the bank functions in the body. The training effect happens. Your skill advancement happens. Repair happens. Brain and muscle repair, body systems repair, heart, lungs, everything. That's critical. And if it happens during sleep, the more you sleep, the more repair happens. So that's another good way to go.
All right, well, we're getting close to time here. Is there any other lingering questions, Brenda, or anything at Mr. North?
I think that for us, the bell's gonna ring really shortly here, and so that's just a reality in our lives.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, John, thank you so much. And Kara and Nick.
Thank you, guys. Good luck.
Yes, thank you all so much for coming. I'm going to leave this up here as you guys are wrapping up. Just some quick notes. Please make sure that you do your attendance and sign in. I will resend those links via email to Mr. North and Dr. Nelson to make sure that everyone signs in.
Will you put the QR code back up?
Yes, I can put that QR code back up. Use my fast running through here. There you go. So there's the QR code to make sure to sign in. So please be sure to put your phone up there before you walk out and just make sure that we can get you caught up and get you entered into the raffle. Again, the next session is going to be on Thursday, November 11th at noon, and we'll be talking about nutrition and hydration. So thank you all again so much for attending our first Performance Academy, and hopefully we'll see you next month.
All right.
Thank you.
Take care, guys.